But it takes time. We all have a gift, but I don't waste mine. Everything looking good below a waistline. Baby girl, back it up like a rewind. Meet a different person in a different city. Almost but it takes time. We all have a gift, but I don't waste mine.
Hello?
Everything looking good below.
Hello, hello. Hey everybody, my name is Matt Montanez, and I'm going to teach you how to use Avid Pro Tools. I'm going to start from the very beginning in the series, and when I mean the beginning, I'm talking about the very basics. So today I'm going to be talking about the edit window, the mix window, and the transport window. In the series, there's going to be 12 lessons. This is lesson 1, and the last lesson is going to be an introduction to mastering, which is going to get really cool. So as we progress through these lessons, it's going to get more and more advanced. But today will be just the very basics. And I've been using Pro Tools since Pro Tools 6. Currently, Pro Tools 12.8.1 is out. I'm going to be using 12.4 to show you this stuff. 12.8.1 is just slightly different, the UI, but overall it's the same exact program. The windows are the same, just about the same, and the edit tools are exactly the same. So let's get started here. When you open Pro Tools, the first window you see is this window here. It's the dashboard. And with the dashboard in Pro Tools 12.4, in this version, you have to Hey everybody, my name is Matt Montanez, and I'm going to teach you how to use Avid Pro Tools. I'm going to start from the very basics today, and today is the first lesson in this series. It's going to be 12 lessons long. We're going to start with the very basics. Hey everybody, my name is Matt Montanez, and I'm going to teach you how to use Avid Pro Tools. In this series, it's going to be 12 lessons. Today's lesson 1, and it's starting with the very basics. We're going to talk about the edit window, the mix window, and the transport window, how to import audio, and I'm going to show you how to use the edit tools and what their functions are. This series will be 12 lessons, like I said, and the very last lesson will be an introduction to mastering. So as we go through this course, it's going to get more and more advanced. There'll be some mixing stuff, how to use extra things like elastic audio, beat detective, some cool things, MIDI, a little bit of MIDI I'm going to touch up on. And then I'm also going to do like extra videos every now and then, touching up, going into more detail thoroughly on a lot of these cool features and stuff you can use in Pro Tools. I've been using Pro Tools since Pro Tools 6 came out. Currently Pro Tools 12.8.1 is out, but I'm going to be showing you 12.4. I feel 12.4 is the best one to show you just because a lot of people don't want to upgrade to the latest, because when you do, usually you have to update all your plugins, your system, your computer, and it's just a lot of work. I know a lot of people are still using Pro Tools 10, a lot of people are using Pro Tools 11, and I love Pro Tools 12.4. I didn't really care about the UI change in 12.8.1. Maybe I just need to get used to it, and maybe I'll go into doing that one on another segment, another lesson here, and I'll be using Pro Tools first to show you more about that stuff. But all right, here we go. So the first thing you do when you open Pro Tools is you get your dashboard. And with the dashboard in Pro Tools, you have to always title your session first before you can even start your project. In Logic and stuff, you can title it later. In Pro Tools 12.8.1, you can actually title it later, and that's because they added cloud collaboration and stuff like that. So in this version, you get your dashboard and you got to name your song. Or you can open a recent one from your dashboard here. But we're going to create a new one, and I'm going to title as Getting Started Lesson 1. Basically this lesson, you can create from a template and it'll show your whole layout like right away, and it's really cool to do. Pro Tools gives you some like guitar, miscellaneous ones, Pro Tools first one, songwriter template, a record and mix template, but I created my own, which is a My Templates folder, and I have my templates inside it. So it gets in this drop down menu. I'll go into a video about how to do that. Then here you get your file types. You get to choose between WAV and AIFF. Those two file types are uncompressed audio file types. So MP3s are compressed, so you'll already lose quality. So WAV and AIFF is the highest quality you can get. Sample rate and bit depth, I'm not going to get too much into that, but just to go over it real quickly, just over the top, is usually the higher sample rate and the higher bit depth, the better quality, people say. It's saying that you get 24 bits per sample. That's what that's saying. If you're doing any kind of like just like hip hop vocals and stuff like that, you can stick to 44.1. You can move to 88.2 if you're doing live instruments and stuff, or even 192, and that's pretty much it. That's all I'm going to brush up on that. For your I/O settings, you can leave it as stereo mixed or last use, or if you have one of these controllers, you can actually just choose one of those. I like to leave mine on last use, stereo mixed. Here, interleave, just leave it ticked off. I don't like my stereo tracks to be interleaved, I should say. I like them to be separate. And then I always have it prompt for location, so I get to choose where I want to save my session at. If you have location, it's always going to save it in that one location. I don't like that. I like to stay a little more organized because I work with a lot of different artists and I like to have them have their own folder. So I'm going to click create. And then I'm going to go into my folder, Pro Tools, find my name, or you can create a new folder and add one of your artists or whoever you're working with. Mine, Matt Montanez, how to use Pro Tools. One in there, so let me delete that. And then save. Okay, and no. Oh, I guess I popped up a template. I didn't want to do that, but I brought up a template by accident. So let me just delete these tracks. I'm just going to click the bottom one and hold shift and click the top one so it'll highlight all of them. I'm going to right click and click delete. So I'm going to have a blank template here, well, blank screen for you. So this is the way your screen should look, something similar to this. And in this window, this is called the edit window, and it actually shows it up here. That's what it's called. If you hold Command E and press equals on a Mac, it'll switch to the mix window and you see it there. And you can toggle between the two just by holding Command and clicking equals. It's Control equals on a PC. And then you get you can go between the two windows, edit and mix window. I spend 100% of my time in the edit window. I rarely, if ever, go to the mix window. I mean, I can't remember the last time I've actually jumped to the mix window, but a lot of people like that window. For me, it's kind of unnecessary now the way they have the layout in the edit window. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import audio so then I can get into detail on how to do everything. So the way you import audio is you click File, Import, and you click audio, or the hotkey it shows you right there is Command Shift I, and then you get this window, the import audio window. You just go down and you find a track you want to bring in. I'm going to click this one, go the distance, and in this window, when you're selecting your audio to bring in, you always want to click convert or copy. It'll say copy here when the format of the audio you're bringing in is the same format as your session. If it's different, then it'll say convert. So if I'm bringing MP3 to my wave session, well, my format is wave, excuse me, then it'll say convert. So if I want to bring this in, it says copy. And you always want to do that because if you click add, it doesn't copy it into your audio files folder in your session. It'll just basically bring it over from wherever your audio is. So if you send your session out, and you forget to add those files or copy those files into your session when you email it, they're going to open up the session. It's going to be missing the audio files. And you never want that to happen. I'll be going into another segment on how to save sessions. Actually, that'll be next week on how to save sessions correctly for when you're sending them out and stuff. So I'm going to actually bring this in. I'm going to copy this one over, and then I'm going to convert this one over. So I'll bring in two different files. Here it shows you the file types. The bit depth, the sample rate, if it's the channels, so stereo or mono, or even 5.1 or whatever. The length of the song, the size of it, just a little description. The actual file you're bringing in, then it shows the start time, the end time, and the length of your song. You can preview it here if you click play. You can stop, you can scrub through it, volume to make it louder or quieter. You can remove stuff. And that's just removing it from not importing it. And then apply SRC is sample rate conversion, and that's so you can change the sample rate. So if I was in a higher sample rate, I would have to convert the sample rate up. So I'd have to click here and switch the sample rate and then click tweak head and slowest so it'll match and it'll import correctly. So we're going to click done on those two files, and then here's that audio files folder that I was telling you. So it's going in my get started lesson 1 in my audio files folder, which is automatically created when you create your session. Let's actually, let me show you that right now. Well, let me show you that right after this. You got your audio import options because there's different ways you can bring in your audio. New track is what I always click. You can add it to just the clip list, which I'll show you shortly. And then you get to choose where you want it at. The session start to a selection if you had a selection selected, or you can spot. Spot means you assign a specific position afterwards. So you'll be, once you click OK, it'll say, okay, where do you want to put it at? 1 bar, 2 bar, 1 minute, 2 minutes, things like that. I'm going to just go to, I'll actually do spot this time just so you can see it, because if I click session start and click OK, it's just going to put it to the beginning. But I'm going to show you spot so I can explain it a little bit. Here's OK. So now you get to choose the time scale the way you want it. Either minutes, seconds, time code, frames, samples, or bars and beats. I like to stick to bars and beats for my main time, my main time code. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to click 1 bar because I want it at the first bar of the song, and that's where it's going to start. And if I click OK, it snaps it to the beginning. So let me show you that folder real quick on what Pro Tools automatically creates when you load up a session. So here's my Pro Tools folder. Here's my name. Here's how to use Pro Tools. Here's getting started lesson 1. So inside that folder, it automatically creates an audio files folder, a bounced files folder, the clip groups folder. This is the session, the session file, then file backups, and then video files, and then a cache. That's what automatically creates every time you make a session, is all those files. All right. So let's go back here. And in our edit window, this right here is the modes in the way you can move your clips or regions. It's called clips. Back in the day, it was called regions, and these are your clips and regions here. So you get 4 different modes. There's a grid mode, and inside the grid mode, there's 2 different grids, absolute and relative grid. You get spot mode, shuffle mode, and slip mode. This right here are your zoom toggles. These are presets to zooms. Then you got your edit tools. And then you got some preference functions here. This is your counters, and you can actually click a show sub counter and have two counters, which I like the second one, minutes and seconds. This shows where you're selected at in your song. We got here, which is your grid value and then your nudge value. And then this is your transport and your output meters. Here you have your rulers. If you bring this down, you get something called a universe. If I click this arrow out and this arrow out, you get your tracks list, your groups list, and your clips list. Okay, so in the universe here, which I never use, but usually the universe, what it does, it shows your clips so you can actually scroll through. If you have like hundreds of clips in here, your tracks, excuse me, then you can see them a little better and you can kind of fly through it. But I don't use it. I feel like that's more for scoring and stuff for like movies, doing sound for movies. So I don't use it that often. So in these modes, the way these modes work, to make these bigger, you can just go here and drag down, or you can click this ruler here, and then you can switch the size. I'm just going to make it large so we can see this better. So these are your grid modes, your movement modes. So in your 4 modes here, they all do a different thing. So in grid mode, if you see these grid lines here, and this button toggles them on and off, when you grab your region or your clip and you move over, it will snap onto those lines. And that's in absolute grid mode. So in relative grid mode, let's say you're behind the line like a certain amount of samples or half a bar or a full second, as in this case it's about a full second. And I can tell because right here shows 4 seconds and then 3 seconds, bar 3, bar 2, so about half a bar. If you go in relative grid mode and you try to snap it over, it'll keep that same, like however much you're over it. But if I'm back in absolute and I try to snap over, it won't do that. It actually snaps to that line. So it depends what you use. I always just keep it in absolute. I rarely go in relative grid mode. Slip mode bypasses the grid so you can move it freely. Spot mode, when you try to move, it'll ask you, where do you want it at? So bar 2. Try to move it again. Where do you want it at? Let's go back to bar 1. And shuffle mode, well, the way shuffle mode works is it snaps it to the next thing that's on the left-hand side. Oops. Let me go back in grid. Let's pull out a big old chunk of audio here. So if I got shuffle mode and I want to move it to the left, it's going to snap it all the way to the left. And then like even here in this case, if I have it over here and I'm in shuffle mode and I want to move it a little to the left, it's going to snap it all the way to the left by itself. And that's what shuffle mode does. Okay, so then you got your zoom toggles. And your zoom functions here, this is to zoom in, this is to zoom out, and this is to zoom in and out of the waveform. This is to zoom in and out of the MIDI. If you had MIDI, it'll do this function. And then you got your presets to zooms. So these are presets which you can actually set up yourself. Let's say you love this zoom and you want that as number one. You click and hold and it'll tell you to zoom the preset. Recall is just, well, like if you push the button and you want to use that zoom. That's all that does. Here's your edit tools, and in your edit tools you got your magnifying glass, which is your zoom tool, and that's just to zoom in. You hold Alt Option and then you zoom out. You go in there and it's a single zoom. So the way single zoom works is once you click it once, it'll go back to the last tool you had selected every single time. Okay. Then you have your trim tool, and in your trim tool is so you can trim your audio to trim your clips and regions. So you can just like make them smaller, you can cut, so you can do loops, put tracks together, etc. Inside there you have one called time compression expansion, and what time compression expansion does is it stretches or shrinks the audio file, but it's supposed to keep the same pitch. So let me solo this so you can hear how it is regular, and then I'm going to stretch it a little bit.
Yeah, I grew up in the hood, nigga.
And then if I stretch it a little bit, it'll be slower.
Yeah, I grew up in the hood, nigga.
And then if I shrink it, it'll be faster.
Yeah, I grew up in the hood, nigga.
And that's what that does. Then you got loop, which all it's going to do is just loop this section you have here. And that's all that does.
Yeah, I grew up in the hood, nigga.
Okay. So then you got your selection tool, and that's pretty much all it does is it selects. So you just select. That's all you're doing. Then you got your grabber tool, and in the main grabber tool, you just grab audio and you can move it over. You go inside and there's one called separation mode. So the way separation mode works is if you have a section selected, then you grab your separation grabber tool and you click it, it will separate it out and pull it out. That's all that does. Then you have one called object tool, which is really cool because, for example, if I'm in my regular grabber tool and I click here, hold shift, and I want to grab this one over here as well, it's going to highlight everything in between. But if I have object on and I click this one and then I hold shift and click this one, now I can just move these two freely without affecting the one in the middle. Really cool tool. This one's called your scrubber tool, and it's really just to audition stuff. So you click and then you just scroll over with the mouse, forward or reverse. Then you got your pencil tool, which is used for automation stuff. So you got a few different kinds there: line, triangle, square, random, and parabolic and S-curve. That's all that does. These functions here are for just preference uses. And for this is just a zoom toggle. So when you click it, it'll expand it to the full width or full size of the screen. And if you click it again, it takes it off. This is called tab to transients, and what this is, it's really cool. It just, when you hit tab on your keyboard, it jumps to the next transient, which is the next peak of the audio right there, where you can do a nice sweet cut and you can really blend stuff in together, like when you're at putting files together to make loops and things like that. This one right here is called mirrored MIDI editing. I will show you how to do that once I bring up a MIDI track, but basically when you have it on, if you have something looped, when you move one part of it, then all of it will move together like the same note. And then if it's off, it won't do that. It will just move the first loop of it. So if you have two of the same loop, I'll have to just show you. It'll be easier to show you. When you got automation follows edit, if you had any automation on, like volume automation, pan automation, which means it's going to automatically do those moves, then when you edit the track and move it over, it'll follow it. If you don't have it on, then the automation will stay there even though you move the track. So it's nice to have on. This one here called link timeline and edit selection is a little different. I always have it off, but what it does is when you click here on the timeline, then your playhead moves. If you have it off and you click on your timeline, the playhead stays there. So let's say, for example, I click play here.
Bitch, I'ma ride with you, I got a vision.
And then I click over here.
Bitch, I'ma ride with you, I got a
It'll keep starting from the same spot. If I have it on, and I click here.
bitch, I'ma ride with you, I got a vision.
And then if I click over here,
These words are vicious, I'm on.
it'll follow wherever I selected. So I always leave that off, and that's just because I like to edit and record or whatever I'm doing at the same time. Then you have this function here, which is link track and edit selection. So if I have that on, which I like to keep on, if I click on this track, it'll highlight the name. If I click on this track here, it highlights this name. If it's off, and I click up here, it doesn't highlight the name. It doesn't show you where it's at. It's not following it. And this one here is the worst preference in the world. I don't know why Logic is like this by default, and I don't know how to take it off Logic. If you do, shoot me a comment below. I always leave it off. It's the worst thing in the world. Basically, it's called Insertion Follows Playback. So if, let's say you're playing a song. I have it on right now, okay? And I start playing the song here. And then I stopped it right here. Then when I hit play,
Yeah, I grew up in the hood, nigga.
it starts where I stopped it at, and I don't like that. The playhead will follow it. I like to leave it off, so when I hit play here, I hit stop, and then I hit play again, it stops from the same exact spot, and I love that. That's the greatest feature, to leave that off. Then you got your counters, and your counters, you just have a few different counters to show where you're at, bars and beats, your sub counter, which you can switch to minutes, seconds, time code, frames, samples, wherever you want. This cursor just shows you where your cursor is at, so wherever you scroll, it's just going to move with it. Then right here, these little guys here are, well, there you go. Timeline data online status shows you that all the data loaded. This one shows session data online, all the data loaded. This is delay compensation. When it's green, it means there's no latency going on. When it's red, that's bad, so you got to turn on delay compensation. This shows if anything's soloed and if anything's muted. If I take off this mute, it goes away. So that's all that does. And this just shows your start, end time, and your link selection. So if I select, then it's going to show that I have stuff selected. Then, like I said, these are grid values. So if I want to switch my grid value to 16th notes, I'll get more little lines, or even like quarter notes, so it'll be less. I like to have it on bars. And then your nudge values, which you can switch it to minutes, seconds, however you want it, and you can move stuff over. So for example, if I want bars and beats, my nudge value as 1 bar, and I have this selected. And in this mode, you always have to have this on or else it doesn't work. You use the period and comma to nudge. So if I want to nudge left, I'll hit the comma and it nudges a bar over. I'll hit the period and it nudges it over. And that's usually just to line like tracks up, vocals and things like that, instruments. So it's real cool to use. Right here you have your little transport, and this online feature here is really when you're trying to connect an external sequencer or like a tape machine, making Pro Tools and the tape machine work together. Like one's a slave and one's a master, and that's more advanced stuff which I won't get into today. You got your stop button, your play button, your record button, return to start button, go to end button, rewind, and fast forward. And the only two that have different things inside them is the play button and the record button. If you hold control and you click the play button, it'll go to regular play and loop play. And loop play is, well, that's what it does. It just loops it.
Yeah, I grew up in the hood, nigga.
So it just keeps playing. And then if you don't have that on, it won't loop. In this one right here in your record button, you have different modes. So you have your record mode, you have your record in destructive mode, your loop recording mode, and your punch-in mode. I always leave it on punch-in mode because basically, if you have a track up, let me bring a quick audio track up. If you have a track up and you're recording, but you just hit play, the artist just wants playback, and then they start doing like a cool ad lib or riff. Right now, how I keep talking, and like, oh no, I missed it. Well, in punch-in mode, you can actually still hit record now, and now it's starting to record. Then you can stop it, and then you can use your trim tool. Oops, I have the loop trim on. Let's put it back standard. You can use your trim tool to bring it back, and it was actually recording from the moment you press play. If you have just record mode on there, it won't do that. You actually can't even go into record mode right there. So I always leave it in punch-in mode. Destructive mode means it's deleting your whatever's right there underneath it. It will just delete it and just keep that one file. And you don't want that. You want to stay in non-destructive mode, because let's say it's something you ended up needing later on. Loop record mode is basically that. It just, whatever you have selected, then you're in loop record mode, and it just keeps looping and recording at the same time. But I stay in punch in mode. These little lights are just indicators showing that something's on recorded and something's input monitored. You need input monitoring on so people can hear you. If you turn it off, if you just keep looking at my audio 1 there, it'll actually stop bouncing up when I hit record. So now it won't bounce. Oh, actually it is bouncing. That's pretty cool. But usually they can't hear themselves. Yeah, you always want to hit that on, or else they can't hear themselves. I think mine's just routed differently today just so I can do this live stream for you. That's why it'll still bounce. Sorry about that. In your clips list right here, it just shows all your clips, and basically you have your parent and then you have your children. So whenever you make a cut, like this one I haven't messed with, so it's just this one dark file. But if I cut this off right here, it'll create the little children of it. So this is the first one, the second one, and the third one. If I cut it right here, it'll create new ones. And that's all that does. And that's why the clip list is shown like that. Whatever one you click, it'll actually highlight in the clips list which one it is. So it's real cool stuff. The tracks is just that. It's just a tracks list showing which tracks and which, if you reorder them, it changes the order over here to the left. Groups, when you start making groups, it'll just show in the groups list there. So there's a cool thing called keyboard focus mode, and in 12.8.1 I believe it's on automatically. You don't have to toggle it on and off anymore. But in this version and earlier versions, it's right here, the A to Z. And I think Pro Tools 7, it's up here in your preference functions. So you can just toggle it on and off. So you can do faster stuff. For example, with it on, you can just press the letter T and you can zoom in, and you can press the letter R and zoom out. You can just hit the letter Z to undo. Without that, then you have to hold like Command and Shift or things like that just to zoom in and out, and it's kind of a pain. So I always keep it on. Then you got your tracks here, or let's go back to the rulers first. You got your rulers here, and then you have the sub menu, which you can actually show more stuff. So you can show your minute seconds, your time codes. You can show samples if you want to. I feel like a lot of them are unnecessary, except minute seconds, bars, and beats for what I do. So I always pull a lot of it off. So it's like samples, I'm going to hide it. And to hide it, you can hold Alt Option and click, or you can just click the menu and tick it off. For your tempo is this one. When you click this plus, you can change the tempo, and you can show the tempo going through. Same thing with your meter and your markers. In your tracks, if you click this menu, you can actually bring up a little thing called comments and put in comments and things like that. So like I say, hey, this track needs work, more EQ. So if I send a session to someone else, they can read that, they'll see that comment there, and they're like, okay, I have to add some EQ to this track. You have your inserts to add plugins, and then you have your sends to bust things out for your reverb and delay effects and things like that. Here's your inputs and outputs, and mine shows these because I have it on here. Yours might be like this where it's off, but I like to leave mine on so you can change your inputs and outputs. Basically, your inputs are what you're recording, like microphones, guitars, and things like that. Your output is the one underneath, and that's just going what you're playing at, going to your speakers or headphones and things like that. Then you got your volume fader, which you can go up and down to lower things, make things loud, and your pans, that's what these are. And that's pretty much panning things left to right. So if I play here and I go left,
Yeah, I grew up in the hood, nigga.
right, that's what that does. I can lower it, raise it
Yeah,
up,
I grew up in
and that's what that does. So that's pretty much it. That's at least it for the edit window, unless you want to know that this just zooms in and zooms out, but that's all you really need to know here. So I'm going to go to the mix window now, and the mix window is a lot easier to understand. It's a lot more simpler. So I'm going to hold Command and hit equals, and it's to bring up my mix window. And in your mix window, it's the same exact thing. So you have your inserts, your sends, your inputs and outputs. Then you have your automation, which actually on your edit window you have that as well, which is here, which I didn't show you. It's right here, your automation. Then this is to go into automation so you can actually see it visually. You can freeze your tracks in this version in Pro Tools 12, and then you can switch your time base, which is samples or ticks. And then these are just your output meters, really. So you got your automation, your groups, you can pan and then record, input monitoring, solo and mute. Then you have your fader. This is just for your voice, which that's also over here. And what the voice is back in the day with Pro Tools, you're limited on how many voices you can have in your track. So like you would actually have to turn some tracks off, their voices off, to bring in more tracks. Then this has delay compensation on. This shows your delay compensation. And you can actually change the way this looks a little bit right here in this little dropout menu. But I usually leave mine like this. But like I said, I rarely ever, if I even do, go into this window. Like it's kind of pointless since everything's here in your edit window. So that's some pretty cool stuff. So I'm gonna bring up the transport window, which looks a little bit different because you have your MIDI functions. And these MIDI functions, all they are is like you have conductor track, which you can go to manual tempo conductor, which you can't have tempo changes. You're pretty much set to one tempo. So I like to leave it on if you want to ever put tempo changes. It'll speed up your track and things like that by itself. MIDI merge is super awesome, and I'll get into that when we get into MIDI, but I'm going to explain what it does now. And what that does is, let's say you're not too great with keyboard, but you're going to be composing something. And let's say you only can do the chords first on your right hand. So you can play your chords, boom, 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 boom. Then you can go back, and let's say you want to play the bass chords now, the bass notes, and that you start from the beginning. Once you start hitting the bass notes with this ticked on, it'll combine them. So it'll be like if you played both hands at the same time. Really cool. Then you got your metronome, which is just that. It's just the metronome. And then you got wait for note. And what wait for note is, that's part of MIDI as well, is when you have that on, then you hit record. Pro Tools won't start until you actually hit the keys on your keyboard, on your MIDI controller. Then it'll start moving. And then it'll wait for the next note, and then you hit it and it'll start moving. And that's what that does. Then you just got your counter, and this is just showing what you're doing. So if you switch your tempo, which you can see it's moving on the edit window also, that's what it does. And then you have your count off, which is it's going to count 2 bars before it actually hits where you want to start recording. Then you just got your counters again. And then this is the same thing, online mode, to sync a external sequencer or like a tape machine. And this is to generate MIDI time code. And that's, again, for more advanced stuff, which I won't get into. And then I explained these functions already in the edit window. And then you got your pre-roll, post-roll, and fade in. And that's pretty much what they do, is pre-roll. So it'll count, for example, if I had 2, then where I have my playhead at with it active and I hit play, it'll jump back to this flag. If I put it to like 1 here, it'll start playing from there. Post roll, kind of same thing, but it's not going to stop until it hits that flag where the ending at. So if I have it here, oops, I didn't click 1. It'll stop there if I had this little section selected here. So actually it didn't. Why didn't it do that? Let's see.
What's your listen? These words are vicious. I'm on a mission.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the post roll is. Maybe it's just for when you're recording, because I believe it's when you have the selection, then it'll go to the end flag. I think that's when you're just recording. Let's try that out.
Bitch, I'm a ride with you. I got a vision. What's your listen? These words are vicious. I'm on a mission.
Yeah, it's for when you're recording, you see? So now that I hit record, it started from the pre-roll and then ended on the post-roll, even with that selection. But it's only going to record that little selection piece. So that's some cool stuff there. That's pretty much it for that, and pretty much everything I want to talk to you guys about today. The only other thing I highly suggest is mess around with these edit tools, because this is the main tool that I love to use, which is called the Smart tool, which I will explain now. If you click the top up here, it's the Smart tool. And what the Smart tool does, it's the greatest thing ever in Pro Tools. It makes your workflow go super fast. So this is how it works. You get your 3 tools in one. Basically, if you're in the middle or the top, you get your selector tool. If you go, as soon as you hit underneath the bottom of the wave or the clip or region, you get your grabber tool. If you go to the left, you have your trim tool. You go to the right, you have your trim tool. So there's your 3 tools already. But if you go to the top right corner or top left corner, you get your fade tool. Okay? And then if you go to the bottom right corner, you get your crossfade tool. Or the bottom left corner, you get your crossfade tool. And that's when you have 2 regions connected to each other like this. You can crossfade them. See that? So it's really cool stuff. And I really like it. So my recommendation is just mess around with Pro Tools a little bit, get used to where everything's at, mess with the tools, enjoy them, have fun with them, get used to that smart tool, because that's how you're going to cut your work time in half. You're editing and you're moving things around and stuff. It'll make things run super duper fast for yourself. You'll love using it. I mean, that's my favorite thing about it, instead of always having to use hotkeys to switch stuff, and that's the F keys. Oops. Sorry about that. That's the F keys. I'm on my laptop, so I have to actually hit the FN key, and then it switches your tools up there, just like that. So yeah, it's the greatest thing ever is the smart tools. So you don't always have to click the hotkeys to do that. So that's it for today. But next week, I am going to go over some new stuff. I am going to go over how to save sessions correctly. So when you're sending stuff out to a mixing engineer, a mastering engineer, or something like that. So you're going to do that. You're going to do save copy in, save as, and save as template. And you're going to learn what all those are and how to use them effectively. I am going to teach you, I'm actually going to manipulate tracks. So I'm going to show you how to actually work with audio and tracks like vocals. I'm going to bring in a full session and work with vocals for you guys, so you can see how I'm using the tools the right way, correctly, how I'm aligning things up and everything, the speed of a workflow. And I'm also going to go over, I guess I can probably even go a little over on bringing in a template and using stuff like that. Probably not too much, but because I want to do a whole different video on actually going over templates and stuff and saving your own templates. I think that'd be the best bet for you guys, because everybody eventually you're going to want to have your own template. It just speeds up your workflow. So let's say you're always using a certain set of reverbs and delays, you want to bring that in, and people will really, it'll make you just load your session faster instead of always doing routing and things like that. So I hope this helped you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Just shoot me a comment below if you have any questions or you want to know anything else more thoroughly. I'll make a video on that. And just subscribe to my channel. Check me out at mattmontanez.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and YouTube, which is here. Just subscribe and let me know what you guys think. All right. Have a good day. Thanks, guys.